In the 1930s, two fantasy films went through difficult productions and beat the odds to become beloved classics, and among the most cherished films in cinematic history, still watched by new generations over 80 years after they were first released. One even influenced the creation of the other. I'm referring to Walt Disney's animated feature, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and MGM's musical adaptation of The Wizard of Oz. Both of these have earned their places as important feats of filmmaking, but which do I prefer? Before I share my thoughts on these two movies, let's take a brief look at their history. Walt Disney risked a lot when he decided to produce his first full-length animated feature. At that point, his studio had only made animated shorts, and Hollywood had never before released a full-length cartoon. The rest of Tinseltown thought Walt was making a huge mistake, and Snow White was referred to as Disney's folly by several people who thought it would fail. The attitude was that animation was best suited to shorts, and audiences would have no tolerance for watching a cartoon any longer than the usual length being produced at the time. The budget for Snow White grew much higher than Disney anticipated, and Walt even had to mortgage his house. His own brother Roy and his wife Lillian also thought Snow White was a bad idea and tried to dissuade him from making it. The most support Walt got on the film was from Bank of America executive Joseph Rosenberg, who saw an early cut of the movie and assured him that Snow White would be an enormous success. After 3 years of trying to figure out the story and the characters, experimenting with the animation, and even cutting entire sequences, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was released in 1937. It was an enormous hit at the box office, and received ecstatic reviews from critics and audiences. Walt Disney had proven his doubters wrong, and created something beautiful and timeless that more than held the viewer's attention for 83 minutes. It's common in Hollywood for one studio to see another's success and try to capture some of that for themselves. Seeing how successful Snow White was for Disney, Louis B. Mayer at MGM decided they should make their own Technicolor fantasy musical, and bought the rights to L. Frank Baum's The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Several writers were involved in coming up with a usable screenplay for an adaptation that would incorporate original songs by Harold Arlen and Yip Harburg. Noel Langley's draft is what really got the ball rolling on the film, although Herman J. Mankiewicz would contribute heavily to the early scenes in Kansas. The actual production of The Wizard of Oz was a nightmare for many of the people involved. Norman Taurog was the first director assigned, but he only filmed a few test scenes. Richard Thorpe then became the director, but producer Mervyn LeRoy hated what he was doing and decided to replace him. Before Victor Fleming was hired, George Cukor provided suggestions of his own, which would play a significant role in shaping the finished film. Later on, Fleming had to leave the film early to replace Cukor on Gone with the Wind. King Vidor completed the remaining scenes, primarily the ones set in Kansas. The switching of directors was not the only recurring problem on The Wizard of Oz. Buddy Ebsen had been cast as the Tin Man, but he had a terrible allergic reaction to the makeup and wound up in the hospital. Jack Haley took over, with the makeup being changed to avoid what happened to Ebsen. Meanwhile, Margaret Hamilton got burnt when filming the scene where the Wicked Witch of the West leaves Munchkinland in a puff of smoke. The hot studio lights also made it difficult for the actors wearing the heaviest costumes. When the movie was released in August 1939, it received strong reviews from critics. It was even nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards and won 2 Oscars for the score and the song Over the Rainbow. While The Wizard of Oz did wind up one of the highest-grossing films of 1939, it actually lost money on original release because of the high budget. Re-releases and television airings would later help cement the film as a classic that would always be discovered by children for decades to come. I myself grew up on both Snow White and The Wizard of Oz, and I would watch them frequently on video, so I maintain an admiration for both of them and find they still hold up remarkably well. Beyond their production, they share other things in common, which I'll get into. Let's start with the main characters. Snow White is often dismissed as a dull lead protagonist, but I think she does a job in making her sweet and likable. She's sympathetic from her first scene of the movie, using a storybook to explore her backstory. She's portrayed as kind and someone who just wants to live happily. However, she's still aware of the Queen's evil and understands the threat when she's warned by the huntsman that the Queen wants to do away with her. Her bond with the animals and dwarves is nicely portrayed too, and we see why they grow an attachment to her. I used to see her as naive for so easily falling for the disguised queen giving her the poison apple. However, I think it would have been out of character for Snow White to dismiss this old woman at the dwarf's window. Do you really expect her to say, "No, you're ugly, take your filthy apple away from me"? It would have run counter to everything we know about her. As Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, Judy Garland brought her own innocence to the role. She also portrays Dorothy as someone who wonders about life away from Kansas, although her main motivation after she lands in Oz is to return back home. Dorothy is frequently shown able to stand up for herself, although even she gets scared by that witch threatening her life over a pair of slippers. On a recent viewing, it struck me how much Dorothy cries in the movie, but it makes sense with everything she has to deal with, and Garland pulled off those parts exceptionally well. A reprise of Over the Rainbow is even filmed when Dorothy is held in the witch's castle, and she sings the song through tears. However, the scene was cut because it was too sad. Only the audio exists, but even just listening to it is heartbreaking. The villains in both movies prove memorable and frightening in their own way. The Queen in Snow White is depicted as cold and obsessed with being the fairest one in the kingdom. The animators made sure to give her a regal appearance, and the mood and music of her scenes add a lot to the character. The fact she wants to kill Snow White simply because she's prettier is demented. What I find interesting is that when she drinks the potion that turns her into the old woman, her personality changes too, as she often cackles and makes jokes, in contrast to her serious demeanor in earlier scenes. So I have a theory that the potion not only changed her appearance, but her mind as well. That transformation scene is one of the highlights of Snow White, with the artist using so many impressive tricks when showing the potion altering her. Originally, the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz was going to be depicted very similar to the Queen in Snow White. Gail Sondergaard was cast in the role and did a few costume tests, but the filmmakers decided they wanted to make her the conventional ugly witch, and Sondergaard dropped out. Margaret Hamilton played the Wicked Witch instead, and she was made green, a departure from Baum's book, partly to take advantage of Technicolor. The Wizard of Oz is also what popularized the stereotype of witches being green. From the second she appears on screen, she leaves an impression and proves a legitimate threat for the heroes. Until Dorothy accidentally throws one at her, of course. Hamilton's Wicked Witch is one of the most memorable villains in cinema history, and for good reason. The Seven Dwarfs play an important role as Snow White, and the filmmakers were able to give each of them distinct personalities. Yes, most of them have their personalities in their names, but they made sure to not just leave them at that. They feel properly fleshed out, with Grumpy given the most development, as he goes from being annoyed at Snow White's presence to becoming the most emotional when she's poisoned. From that first meeting to the scenes of them having a good time in their cottage, we see the positive impact Snow White has on them. Credit also goes to the animators for their excellent work in making them funny and endearing. Walt Disney took a chance on choosing a story where the audience would have to care about 8 title characters, but he and his team succeeded. Similarly, the makers of The Wizard of Oz were able to make the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion into personalities that Dorothy would believe would become friends with. They did have Baum's original story to help guide them, but Ray Bolger, Jack Haley, and Burt Lair, and the incredible costumes were key in making them larger than life. In addition to being hilarious, we see their determination to get the things they desire from the wizard. Speaking of the wizard, Frank Morgan was great in depicting the good and wise heart underneath the man behind the curtain, as well as his guilt at tricking Dorothy and her friends. I actually think one of the sweetest scenes in the movie is when it reveals that the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion had already proven they had the things they wanted all along. Both Snow White and The Wizard of Oz employed interesting story structure. With Snow White, Disney and his team had to try new things when making the jump to a feature film. Most of the Disney cartoons were told primarily through the visuals and were not heavy on dialogue, whether it was the comedic gags in a Mickey Mouse cartoon, something more dramatic like in The Old Mill, or driven by music like the Skeleton Dance. For Snow White, the storymen and animators still pitched comical gags, primarily for the dwarves and animals. However, the film also included a number of dialogue-driven scenes that were required to move the story forward. The opening scene with the Queen talking to the magic mirror, the first meeting of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and the Queen tricking Snow White to eat the apple are all examples of scenes where characters are mainly conversing with one another. I think scenes like these more than proved Walt Disney and his artists were up to the task of making a narrative feature film. Meanwhile, you had scenes like the washing hands sequence and the dwarf sleeping that maybe seem unnecessary, but are still entertaining and bring their own charm to the picture. Disney was not above cutting scenes he felt did not contribute to the plot or slow the film down, though. Ward Kimball animated a musical number where the dwarfs loudly eat soup, which Disney then removed, much to Kimball's annoyance. The story structure of The Wizard of Oz is one that has actually influenced several filmmakers over the years, and the way the story is constructed is smartly done. Herman J. Mankiewicz felt the early scenes in Kansas were especially important in letting us get to know Dorothy before she winds up in Oz. The plainness in Kansas also provided a contrast to the magical feel of Oz. In fact, it was Mankiewicz who suggested that those scenes be filmed without color, to heighten this effect on the audience. When Dorothy arrives in Oz, she has a goal and motivation, obstacles to overcome, and along the way meets characters who will be important on her journey. In this case, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion, who have wishes of their own, and they're eventually tasked with defeating the witch. I don't think there is a single wasted moment in The Wizard of Oz, and every scene plays a vital role in drawing us into the story and connecting with the characters. There's a reason multiple directors, including the likes of George Lucas, David Lynch, Pete Docter, and the Coen brothers, have used the film story as a template on their own work. The music in both films is also iconic and managed to stand the test of time. Frank Churchill and Larry Morey's songs in Snow White are beautiful compositions that definitely stay in one's head after watching the movie. Someday My Prince Will Come is the centerpiece of the soundtrack, with its sweet melody and romantic lyrics. with A Smile and a Song, Whistle While You Work, and One Song are also fitting tunes for Snow White. Meanwhile, Hi Ho is an excellent introduction for the Seven Dwarfs, starting right from when they first appear in the mine, and it serves as a great anthem for them. The score by Paul Smith and Lee Harline is also exquisite, with Snow White the Queen and the Dwarfs having their own identifiable leitmotifs. The final piece of the score especially helps heighten the film's ending. Interesting enough, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was the first Hollywood movie to be given an official soundtrack album, as studios at the time did not think film music would be all that profitable, so that's another practice you can thank Walt Disney for. Arlen and Harburg's songs from The Wizard of Oz have been a major part of pop culture too, especially Over the Rainbow. It's a lovely song that perfectly applies to Dorothy in the first scenes of the movie, and it's little surprise it's been covered by several singers over the years. Louis B. Mayer actually wanted to remove Over the Rainbow at one point, feeling it slowed the film down, but the filmmakers thankfully fought to keep the song in. Now it's hard to imagine The Wizard of Oz, or even Judy Garland's entire career without it. Over the Rainbow has absolutely earned its place as one of the best songs in motion picture history. The rest of the songs in the movie are also brilliant, both musically and lyrically. Who can forget Ding Dong the Witch is Dead, We're Off to See the Wizard, and If I Only Had a Brain, a Heart, the Nerve. Herbert Steltout's score adds to the magic of Oz, with Miss Gulch and the Wicked Witch's theme perfectly matching their personality, and it says something that even the chanting of the witches' guards is memorable. Snow White and the Wizard of Oz are examples of musicals with fully realized songs that are necessary in developing their characters and telling the story. With Snow White, the Disney artist took the animation to the next level after already experimenting with those elements in shorts. It must have been quite the experience for audiences in 1937 to see these images for the first time. From the use of the multiplane camera to the character animation on the human characters, the studio was able to expand on what they'd accomplished in earlier short subjects. I know the animation on Snow White and the Prince has been criticized, but I think the artists did the best they could, considering they were not accustomed to drawing realistic people at that point. The backgrounds are also beautifully drawn, and the effects are brilliantly done, especially the lighting during the potion scene and the Queen's death scene. For a movie released in 1939, the special effects in The Wizard of Oz hold up incredibly well today. The tornado is an especially remarkable achievement. It really does look like they filmed Judy Garland outside while a tornado was raging. The filmmakers utilized other neat tricks too. The scene where Dorothy first steps into Oz was one that took a lot of planning, including using a body double when she opens the door, and they pulled it off. The witch on her broomstick and the flying monkeys are also very well done effects for the time. So as you can see, I love both of these movies and think extremely highly of them, so it's tricky deciding which of these two I prefer, but I'm going to give the slight edge to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. What Walt Disney, along with supervising director David Hand, accomplished with this film is quite remarkable. It was not just that this was their first animated feature. Snow White managed to adapt the classic fairy tale of its own unique spin and bring so much heart and humor to the story. Every character is memorable and each is properly defined, whether it's the sweetness of Snow White, the cold hatred of the Queen, or the humor of the Seven Dwarfs. Each set piece is exquisitely put together and draws the viewer into the story. When the emotions hit after Snow White eats the apple, they hit hard. The rest of Hollywood did not think it was possible for people to feel empathy for drawings for an extended period of time. But boy did Snow White prove them wrong. What this film did for the medium of animation is deserving of recognition, but it was because the story was so brilliantly told, the characters had just enough personality, and the songs were so delightful that Snow White has stood the test of time as worthwhile entertainment. The Wizard of Oz is also excellent, so don't think of me picking Snow White as a slight against this film. Victor Fleming and Mervyn LeRoy, along with several other artists involved in its creation, brought to life a believable fantasy world of all kinds of imaginative scenarios. Even in places where it departed from L. Frank Baum's book, the film found clever ways of depicting Dorothy's journey. As a musical, it delivers in giving us one fantastic song after another. And much like with Snow White, there's a sympathy for her and a desire to see her get a wish to return to Kansas. So many of the lines remain a part of popular recognition because of what a smart screenplay this is, full of wit and humor. Like many people, The Wizard of Oz is a film I'm always happy to revisit and admire its storytelling and technical marvels. Now let me know in the comments whether you prefer Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs or The Wizard of Oz, and I'll see you next time.